All right. Okay, so can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, perfect. So I am going to talk to you guys about the secret stories. I know you guys have it. Am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Love it. If you don't know who I am, my name is Fletcher Nelson. I used to teach in Buchanan, and then now I teach in Detroit Lakes. I started using these last year, like halfway through the year, and I was like obsessed with them right away. And now I actually traveled with Katie, who's the creator. I went to Wyoming with her at the beginning of August for 2 days. She was giving a PD there, so I hung out with her for like 4 days, and I learned a ton. And again, like she goes way into like the brain science of it, and she created these in her kindergarten classroom in like 2000 or 2001, I think. And she's been selling them and using them and speaking about them since about like 2003. And I just stumbled across them and thought it was something that would help a lot of my struggling kids with reading. And it turned out to be something that all my kids benefited from, whether it was for reading or writing. So that's what I'm going to explain to you guys today, I guess. So I will kind of go over what they are, and then I'll give you reasons like why to use them, because I know sometimes it just seems like one more thing to do and we already have enough to try to fit into our day. I'll show you some examples and then talk about how to implement them into your classroom. And then if you have any questions, we can get those too. And if you have questions at all during it, just let me know. I do have some videos of Katie, the creator of them, just because she has a lot on her YouTube channel. And that way she like talks about it or shows some of the examples from her students. So I'll show some videos throughout the presentation as well. All right, so since you guys haven't used them, let's go about what the secret stories are. They're not a program. So you guys still use Journeys?
Yes.
Okay, so they're not going to replace Journeys. They're just going to go along with it. It's not its own program. There's not a scope and sequence. There's no order you go in. They're just a tool that you're going to find super beneficial to go with every part of your day. It just really, it's not making time for them. They're going to fit in wherever. So it's not a program. You have to think you're going to be learning and following it all. They're like, all they do is they fast track phonics skills for reading and then for their writing. And it's not a traditional phonics lesson. It's not like you're going to sit your kids up at the front and teach them and then they're going to go practice on a worksheet. It's nothing like that. It's just you tell them a quick story. They're going to anchor it to the poster that's on the wall, which I have mine right behind me. And they're just going to continue to use it with their reading, their writing. They can be used with any reading or writing or phonics curriculum. So if you change down the road and from Journeys or whatever, it's going to go with it. It's nothing on its own again, because it's not a program. It's just going to help fast track those phonics skills for kids. And they just really, all they do is they give them a reason behind the way that letters do what they do. Instead of a lot of the times I've noticed when kids would come across a word, I'm like, oh yeah, you just got to remember that word. Or, oh yep, that makes this sound. It just does. So the story's tied it to behavior, which every kid can understand. And it just makes it so they remember them. And they're backed by a ton of brain science. There'll be a little bit of that in here, but I know nothing about that part. That's where Katie is super good at it. She can really explain why it works. And I'm just going to tell you why I think my kids do it. She could tell you the brain stuff, but that's not me. So, and they're not teaching a skill at all. All the stories do is they tell a story, and the kids love stories and they remember stories. If you tell your class a story about yourself, like for my llamas, for example, I mentioned that one time and I have never lived it down. So now every single year I get llamas from all my kids. So it kind of goes along with that. You're just going to tell it to them and they're going to remember it, and they're going to eventually be able to use it in their reading and their writing. Oops. So if you're kindergarten or if you're first grade or even second grade, sometimes those kids don't know all their letters or their letter sounds. They're still going to benefit from these. So there's going to be some examples you'll see in here of videos, but even if you tell the story, you're showing it to the poster, and those kids might not know it's the letter C or H, but they're going to remember the story that you're telling them, and they're going to remember that poster. So it's really powerful, because whenever your kids do then connect, oh, that's what that letter is and what that is, and I see it in this book, then you don't have to go back and reteach them that skill. It's just going to click and it's going to build that bridge, and then it's going to happen to all the stories that they've heard. So it's really cool. Even if like beginning of kindergarten, I know you guys just started. So if you tell one story tomorrow, I guarantee at the end of the day, you could ask your kids, hey, show me what 2 posters are in love. They'll be able to point and they'll be able to tell you what sound they say when they're together. So it's not something like you need to be worried about your kids being ready for, because you're literally just telling them a story. And They're just going to hear what the letters do and how they react, and they're going to remember it. And eventually, once they're ready, they'll be able to connect that to words and reading and decoding and encoding. And again, they don't replace your curriculum. You're still going to follow your scope and sequence for phonics. You're just going to tell the stories whenever they come up. And the reason why this is so beneficial is because a lot of the times there's certain phonics skills that they won't get till second grade. So then if a kid's reading that word or trying to write it, we just kind of tell them, oh, just remember that word, or you'll learn about that later. Where here, you're just going to tell them a quick story. It's going to anchor to the posters you have in your room, so they're going to remember it. And it's just going to, just a way to fast track it. Which all of this I'm saying is just a safe way to introduce these phonics skills. You don't have to be worried about it being developmentally appropriate, because if you were going to teach kindergartners all of these different phonics skills, they wouldn't remember them or understand what you're saying. But when you present it in a safe way in a story, then they're able to relate to that. And Katie, this is one, she kept explaining it like this when I was shadowing her, and she just kept explaining it like a buffet over having like a waitress. So all we're doing with the stories was we're putting it all out there right away. And when the kids are ready, they're going to start using all of these skills, and they're going to be applying it rather than us being a waiter or a waitress and bringing it when we think they're ready. We're just going to put it out there, and when the time comes, they're going to be using it. So as we get there, you'll just see it's just going to be really easy because your kids are going to tell you exactly what they need, and then you're just going to go from there. And then, just no longer have to say like those letters just make that sound, or it's something you have to remember that, or, oh, you'll learn that in second grade. We'll be able to give them a reason like why that will make sense to them. All right. So the brain parts that she really talks about is how all of these, it ties to the social emotional part of our brain, which is in the back. And that's the first part of the brain, or one of the first parts that develops in kids. So the reason that the secret stories work so well is because we're connecting the phonics to that part of the brain rather than a different part, which I don't know which part normally it would be trying to, be going to, but it connects it to that back part. So it really just sticks with them and they're able to use it. So after all that, just backdoor approach, it's going to fast track these skills, and you'll love it. So what you guys have is you have the posters. Does anybody have their posters up at all, or no?
I'm laminated.
Okay, I love it. Good answer. And then you have your book. So if you don't have your book with you right now, that's fine. This looks overwhelming, like right away. The only part you really care about is the red section. And you only care about that probably for the first year. And after that, you probably don't even need this book anymore. So in the red section, if you have ours, that's where the story itself is going to be. So for example, with the CH, the secret, this is what you would just tell your kids. And when I started, I literally just read it to them because I'm like, oh, I actually don't know what that secret is because I literally put these up and didn't open up the book. So I'm just going to go read it to you. And they still remembered it. It's going to have the exceptions. So on the bottom of the CH one, it talks about how sometimes they want to be the conductor. So they make the k sound, like inquire or school. So even though almost all the times the CH does make the ch sound, that's what you're focusing on. But I love that she also gives like the next best option. And I have an example of that. One of my kids was trying to sound out the word chemical, and she kept going chemical. And normally that would be your first instinct, is to make that CH sound. So I just told him like, hey, remember we just told that story. What was the other sound it could make? And she looked back at the poster, saw the little C up here. I don't know if you can see my mouse at all, but you can see the C above and like that smoke. And that was her reminder. Oh yeah, chemical. And then I'm like, is that a word you've heard before? She's like, yep. So then she was able to move on. So it's going to give the most likely and then the next most likely. So you just read the secret part to them, and it doesn't matter word for word. You can obviously put your own twist on it or whatever. This is just, if you don't want to be creative about it, start from there. She gives you actions to go with it too, because that's going to be really beneficial for especially your younger kids to do those actions to help them remember the story. And then there's sometimes a little reminder on there for you. So like on the CH, you just said, make sure you're not doing chugga, 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 choo, choo, because then that's going to confuse them on the sound. You really just want to focus on the ch, ch, ch. So that's how it's set up. So if you're looking at that red part, you can see for every story, you just read the secret. It'll give you some example words if you want. If there's an exception or a next best sound it might make, that will also be in there. And then your action. So that part's super simple. Especially if you are like me on third grade. So if you're third, fourth, fifth, or sixth, you can just read it to them. Like I'm very honest with them. Like, I don't know what that story is. I'm going to go grab my book and I'll read it to you guys. If you're fifth or sixth, you could even just have your book up, be like, oh, that's a good question. You can go find that story in the book and read it and maybe teach us about it after. So there's no right or wrong way to do it. But it's just, that's there for you to go from. And as you get more comfortable, you can make your own adjustments, the stories to make them, you know, fit your personality more or whatever else. But so that's the important part. The next section is the third part. That's like about the why, and there's some resources. So there are going to be some words that don't have a story in them. And she calls those jail words. Some people don't like using that if they have students whose parents might be in jail or incarcerated. So some people call them heart words because they're words you need to know by heart. Some people call it like the timeout section. But she just has some examples of words for there, like could, ate, to. They might not follow a story. So that section's back there. And then the last part, she does have some pages you can make copies off of to practice like the different stories or the different the different stories. She says in that beginning of that part though, just remember like authentic text is the best place for them to find these stories. It's not like you need to tell one and then have a worksheet ready to go with it. But some people do like to have that practice for them. So you can definitely make copies of those in that back section after the red part. And then the very last part, you have some smaller cards. You could rip these out and cut them apart to make like portable ones that kids could take back. I've seen teachers that put them in a pocket chart. So if kids are working their writing, they can run up there, grab one, bring it back quick. Or sometimes they do it as a center where they have to have the kids or the kids go back and forth and choose cards and tell the story to whoever's in their group. But those are another resource that are in the back of your book. And then if you teach kindergarten or first grade, and probably actually second grade too, heck, maybe third grade, the back cover has your link and password to download the musical parts. So there's like the Better Alphabet song and some other things that you'd want to download to play with your kids. So that's kind of all just like the book. And honestly, that's the only part we're going to touch on the book. Like I said, the red section is the most important, but there are some other optional resources there for you as well. All right. So what I want you guys to do, you should have a piece of paper if you don't work with the person next to you. It's just a quick activity, and I think it really helps you understand why you're going to use these secret stories. So on a piece of paper, on like half of it, draw about a brain, just a quick outline. So here's mine. Looks like a kidney bean, but fine. Doesn't have to be fancy. All right, next up, you are going to write 10 letters inside your brain. Doesn't matter what 10 letters, just pick 10 of your favorite letters and write them on the inside of your brain. Once you have those 10 letters in there, you're also going to write down 5 high frequency words or sight words. Choose 5 of your favorite high frequency or sight words. All right, once you have those outside of your brain, so maybe down like here somewhere, don't take up the whole paper, but maybe just draw a quick picture of your favorite animal somewhere outside of the brain. And then someone in there, tell me when most people are done with all those steps. And then when you're done, tell somebody next to you what your animal is too. All right, Denise, what's your animal?
A dog.
A dog. Oh, I thought you were gonna do a cow.
Yeah, that would have been next.
It would have been. That's all right. Okay, are most people done?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, here's what you're gonna do. You are using only the letters that are inside your brain, because that's all you know, and only using the 5 sight words you have inside your brain. I want you to write a sentence telling me what your animal is and why you like it.
Yeah.
You only know the letter sounds that are in your brain. So you have to construct a sentence for me using those 5 words and those letter sounds and about your animal and why you like it. So hopefully you guys have some vowels in there, otherwise you're going to be really struggling. And that's why I made you say what your animal was out loud. That way you can't change it. Alicia, what are you writing about?
A bunny.
Bunny? How's it going?
It has an A.
Oh, that's actually pretty good.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Buddy could have a card.
What do you have?
If it's not real.
I think it was a
Fiction.
nice dog, but I
Maximum.
spelled nice with N-I-S.
That's where we have cards.
Hey, that's good. Good being problem solver. Taking, yeah.
I named my turtle. His name is Keg. So there's some of the letters I had.
I like the name.
So I put me and Keg in box.
Inbox, because that makes a lot of sense. Yep.
Yeah. Well, Keg might live in the box. I can get the box with him.
Yeah. So is this easy to do?
No.
No. So especially if you're a kindergarten teacher, think about how hard it is for like the kids to write when, even if they only know the letter sounds, which is awesome if when they know all that, can they still spell a lot of the words? Like how? Can you spell how just by sounding it out?
No.
No, because you don't know what makes the ow sound. They would look up at the alphabet and they're looking at which letter makes ow. I don't know. So that's when it comes in great. You're like, oh, you're trying to write the word how? Oh, the ow sound. That's O and W. Oh, they're always getting in fights together. I say they're brothers. I don't know if that's what the book says. And like they always play too rough and they're always going ow, ow, ow. So whenever you see those two together, just remember that they're going to say the sound ow. So then that's, oh, when they start writing that, they'll remember, oh, I need to find the poster. Which ones are always fighting? They find that poster and now they can add that sound in there. So just, I mean, having the letter sounds obviously is going to be huge. But I just know, like, you know, in the past, however many years, the focus has been like whole word, like teaching the sight words over the phonics skills. So that just kind of shows you those 5 sight words don't get you very far. Having the letter sounds does, but you still need more than that, especially when you're trying to write those words that aren't just like dog or cat, that you can just easily sound out each letter sound. So that's kind of why you're going to want to use the stories, because they're just going to help. It's a lot of these examples and are going to tie back to like K and 1, but I did put stuff for the older grades too, because I know, like me being 3rd grade, I've seen how beneficial it is for my kids. I just think that when you realize how easy this is for kindergartners to do, and you see how much it helps them, then it opens up a door. You're like, holy crap, if they can do that, then my kids can use it for this. So you weren't really able to write much, and you didn't have enough tools. So we need to be able to provide students with the tools that they need when they're reading and writing. Even knowing the individual sounds wasn't enough. Like I said, that would help a ton. You can spell a lot of words just by having those 26 sounds, but you still need to know, you know, letter combinations. And we wouldn't have to have them guess or memorize words. We can give them the tools to decode and encode when they're writing using the stories. So this is going to be for a quick video from Katie. And in this, she's just gonna be kind of showing you how a lot of what we kind of do contradicts like what we teach, and then they see it in an example and it doesn't even make sense. So
now, I do like to also mention the T. If you had $100 and went to Las Vegas, would you put your money on seeing a T go t or the most in any book you pick up? Because T will say t 1 time out of 10 compared to it saying, unless the book you pick up is about Tommy and his turtle trotting to Toronto. Now, I know what you're saying, though. If you're a reading specialist or a literacy person, you're probably thinking, well, that's not true, actually. TH says, that's a digraph. Your question was, what does T say? T can only say one thing, and that is t. Now, you're looking at that from the top down, and that's our biggest problem when you're talking about perspective. Because from the top down, we know there's a T, and then there's a TH, and a TH is a digraph, and the digraph is what says th, a T just says t. From the bottom up, here's what kids know. There's a letter and it looks like this, and teacher said that's a T, and if you see the letter that looks like this, go T. So I see that letter everywhere, because that letter is everywhere. It's on every book, every page, every line, almost every word. It's everywhere, and so I always see it and I go T, and I'm always wrong. And I don't even know why she says go T, because my teacher doesn't go T. She does something weird with her tongue, and I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, she can read all the words, and I can't read any of them. Now, that's how it would feel to a young kid who doesn't, TH isn't formally introduced on a scope and sequence in terms of code introduction until 1st grade, fall or winter. You couldn't get through the first hour of a book in pre-K and not have the TH hit you in the face 45 times.
So that just kind of shows like a lot of what we teach them, and then it's like, oh, just kidding. It's not doing what we just told you it did. So using the story, so basing letter sounds on behaviors in a story form, you're not going to be teaching and assessing a skills. Like you're literally just going to tell your students a story. If you look through the red pages at all, you're just reading that secret to them, and it's just going to help them understand why those letters are behaving that way when they're together. So T and H, they always need to be separated, because whenever they come together, they always stick their tongues at each other going, and they can relate to that because we all have those 2 kids that we separate constantly because they do crap like that. So it's going off of something kids have already seen in school, and they're going to help them remember. But that's also why it's going to be important that you have your posters up, because then they have that anchor visual for them to see all day, every day. And then they also give the next likely sounds. So like I talked about with the CH, it's not just going to show you like what they are most likely going to make. It'll give you the next likely, so they can be problem solvers when they're going to decode words. And again, if we don't give them access to the code, then we're contradicting ourselves with a lot of what we say. And it just gets confusing for kids, because we're telling them T says T, and then we read the word the. And it does not, you don't hear it in the word the at all. This is another really good one, especially for the grades that do calendar. If you are doing calendar with your kids, this comes across all the time. And again, this wouldn't be a skill like the positional placements of Y. I don't think that's probably taught until like 2nd grade about the different sounds it can make. In kindergarten and 1st grade, we just teach them Y makes Y, or maybe sometimes can be a vowel. So this gives them a reason why behind it.
Just to give you a general idea of what this elephant looks like and the havoc that it causes, imagine telling your class, as many of you sitting here probably do, that Y says yeah. And you sing your little alphabet song and you say, Y says yo, yo, y, y, y. You walk away happy. But then you walk to your calendar, which is your next course of action if you're in a primary grade classroom, because you do it every day. And you proceed to blow to heck everything you just said about the letter Y, because they see that Y all over that calendar. But it's not making the one sound that you told them to attack it with. You only gave them one tool when it came to that Y. You said, Y says yo, yo, y, y, y. That's the equivalent of saying, here's a symbol. When you see this symbol, here's what you're going to hit it with. This is the sound it's going to make. So when you see this symbol, you make this sound. But then when you went to the calendar, we saw words like Monday, Tuesday, January, July, May, Wednesday. Let's see, it could say E. Oh, February. It could say E. It said I. It said A. Now, it didn't say yeah at all. So at least there's one pattern that the brain can attach itself to, which is when I see this letter, the one thing I can be sure about, because I have no clue what it will actually say. But the one thing I know for sure is it's not going to say you. Because unless the word is yellow, yes, you, or yak, you'd be hard pressed to find the Y actually making the y sound in a K2 classroom. You really would. It would be very difficult for you to find it, especially when you compare it to the frequency with which that letter is found saying everything else under the sun. And I haven't even talked about the boys' bathroom. I mean, they see that letter everywhere. Basically, if it can say E and it can say I and it can say A and it can say oi, it's doing about everything it can in terms of the vowels except for the U sound, except it is the first letter in the word you. So it's got to be incredibly frustrating for a logical thinker. And a lot of times this is why our boys will lag behind. Girls don't like things that don't make sense either, but we can deal with them. I mean, in other words, they don't drive us crazy. If it doesn't make sense, we're just like, wow, that's kind of weird. But anyway, boys, they literally are looking at it like a puzzle. Like I should be able to put it together and take it apart, which means then I should be able to put it together again. If it's a code, it should look the same way, no matter how you twist it, turn it, flip it, or flop it. And it's very frustrating to always be met with basically the Scarecrow in the Wizard of Oz that does this. Because that's how you have to feel if you're aware of what you're actually saying to kids in the first hour of any primary grade classroom.
Yep. All right. So, and if you haven't looked, guessing you haven't, like the story for Y is it's Sneaky Y. And we have the superhero vowels. So he found E and I's capes, or actually snuck into their dressing rooms and stole their capes. So when he is at the end of a word or just not at the beginning, he likes to put on his cape because nobody will notice. Kind of like when you're in line walking to lunch. If you're the first person in line, you have to do what you're going to do because the teacher's there. So it'll be y for like yellow. But if he's anywhere else in the word, he's going to misbehave and try to act like he's somebody else because he can get away with it. So again, a story that they can relate to, it takes you 12 seconds to tell that story. They're going to see it up on your wall and they're going to remember that. If they see a Y that's not at the beginning, it's not going to make that y sound. And then this kind of goes with, I'm just going to go a little off topic, but the first day that I had mine, that was one of the first stories I told my class. And then I had a kid named Jay, and he goes, well, I have a Y at the end. My name, it's not saying E or I, because in that story, that's the sound that the other two sounds they make. But then there's a story for A-Y, E-Y being too cool. And I was going, A. So then we went to that story. So I think you'll find too, as you start introducing them, they're going to be like, oh, wait, it doesn't work in this word. And it's just going to lead you to another story. So my class loved them. And I would just have to sit there and tell them ones that they were finding in other words. But anyway, so just kind of like she was saying, though, we're telling them one thing when we're teaching them the letter sounds, and then they're seeing it completely different. So a lot of discrepancies. So like if you've been doing calendar and you're telling your kids in kindergarten or first grade, that A says either A or A, and then they're going to August and it's making O sound, where now you can tell them the story. So if you guys do calendar tomorrow, you can introduce the story. You could tell them, hey guys, I just want to teach you that there's two letters that are in love, A and U, and anytime they're together, when they're next to each other in a word, they just go, ah, and then that makes sense for August. So it's not confusing them of why they're not hearing that A sound in there. And again, like I said, Jay was the one who pointed it out in my class, and that we found like in Grayson, Presley, Dawson, and Emily, we were able to find those stories just within their names. And then again, names can be tough just because, parents can choose how they want to spell things, and sometimes it gets weird and doesn't follow any sort of rule. But for some of them, you are able to go through and find those stories within them. Like Charlie, that has 3 stories right there. And that's not even teaching a lesson. You're just pointing out to them that there's literally three different stories in there. You could tell it to them and then they'll remember them. Again, why we're using, like literally they are so easy. All you're doing is telling a quick story to them whenever you come across it in reading or writing. You're going to give them access to the code that they need to read or when they come to read or write on their own. And you aren't going to assess their knowledge. You're just going to tell them the story. And you will find that they're going to point them out to you everywhere they see them after they learn it. And it kind of gets annoying, but it's awesome. You just wish they would stop sometimes. And you're going to see them using them to write. Like older grades, how many of your kids suck at spelling? Like it's awful. And my class last year would use these. And a lot of them, like for it was AW or AU, that can make the ah sound, or short o, but sometimes they use the wrong one. But then again, like that's still showing that they're using that story. And then the more they read and have that text experience and see it, they're going to realize which one to choose. But they were just referencing them so much for their spelling, which is awesome. Instead of just, going in blind or constantly asking me, they had a tool to use themselves. Like this girl here, this is end of pre-K. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but my vacation house, I don't know very many 4-year-olds that would try to spell the word vacation. And now, did she spell it right? No. But does it make sense what she did? Yeah, because she had heard that she had the sneaky Y story. She had the AY for the A, and then she did the SH for shin. And then for how she had OW instead of OU. But just by hearing those stories, and she's literally 4 years old, she was able to write those words where normally if they didn't have access to those tools, they wouldn't have been able to try to say the word vacation in their writing. So it just kind of shows you how well it's going to stick with them and how much they're going to apply it to whatever they're doing. Right, oops. Another video, I don't know what this one is.
So here's where we break with the real world and go into what I like to call parallel universe. Now, wise critical thinking, we want to elicit learners to think at a higher level. And to do that, we need to change some facts here.
This is why, okay, sorry, now I know what this video is. Like if you're thinking about like, how would I introduce this or how would I tell it to my class? This is kind of goes from there.
So what I can now tell him is, you know what, that is a great question. I love that you asked this question about why this word's August, because you're right. O does say ah, and according to what you see here, that word should be August. But the reason that you think that is because there's a secret that you don't know. So I completely get why you thought that was that word. It's because there's a grown-up reading and writing secret in that word that you don't know. Now, I'm a grown-up, so I have a really big grown-up sized brain, which means it can hold all these secrets. You're a kid, you have a kid-sized brain, which means it's smaller than mine, which means I've got to be careful, because if I tell you a giant grown-up reading and writing secret before your brain's ready, your brain could explode. And now I will say, if you do teach in an early grade, be careful when you say that, because you'll set your criers back off again if it's the beginning of the year. So use that once they know your personality. But the reason behind that is an old brain-based tenet, which is I've got it, you want it, I'll decide if you can have it, but I wouldn't hold my breath. It's big.
All right. And then just one more to going off. Again, she kind of explains like the brain science behind why these work so well. And like I said, I don't understand the brain that well, so I'll let her just do this quick.
And I use this little story to explain this. I was doing a PD for a district, and it was in the summertime, and the teachers were all there. And one of them had brought her daughter, who I guess she didn't have a sitter. She was very well behaved. She was sitting on her mom's lap, playing with her phone. And she only looked up a couple times during the time that I was there. It was about a 5-hour PD. She looked up once when we did a color experiment. And then she looked up again when she heard something weird, which was me going, ah. And she saw me holding this, and she heard that unusual inflection. She saw the body gesture. So she looked up. Now, she was only about maybe just turned 4. So she had no idea what we were talking about. But what was interesting is after the break, when they came back, I said to this little girl, I'm going to call her Lulu. I said, Lulu, can you tell me what these letters say? Now, her mom immediately jumped in and said, oh, she's only just turned 4. She knows her name, but we haven't worked on letters yet. And we're going to work on that this year because she starts kinder. And I said, it's just an experiment. I'm just curious. So I said, can you tell me what these letters say? And she went, ah. Now, she didn't know what a letter was, but she saw this and a sound popped out of her mouth. That's a stepping stone to what later can become decoding. So that's all decoding is. See a symbol, sound pops out. Now, after break, we took another little time, came back, and I actually put some things on a wall. I put about 10 different patterns on a wall. And I went up to Lulu and I said, Lulu, can you go show me the letters that go, ah? And so this time she had to do the reverse. She had to hear the sound and find the symbol that makes it. That's what a writer has to do. When you're encoding a word that you want to write, you have to hear the sound and immediately know what letter choices you have to put down on that paper. And she was able to immediately find this from that sound. Now, she's not going to use that yet to read with it and to write with it, but she has it. She can access it. She can own it and retrieve it. And she was interested enough to get it, not because it was pertinent, she had a use for it to read a book or a word like Johnny, but because we use these tricks. Novelty, the brain loves novelty. If you have a body gesture that's unusual, a vocal inflection that changes, your guys that are ELL learners, they tune out half of what you say if you sound like the Snoopy teacher, the Charlie Brown, blah, 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 blah. But when they hear, or when they see an extreme body gesture, you get their attention. Now, what you do with that attention is key. And that's what we used when she looked up. I was ready for her attention. Now, what's interesting is looking at the brain and where this lies. The brain develops back to front. The back part of the brain is the social emotive center. So that's the feeling network. That part is highly developed when learners come to pre-K. They already know how it feels when no one wants to play with them. They know how it feels when they get to be the line leader. You don't have to teach that part of the brain. There's a social emotive awareness that learners develop far before they come to us. The higher level processing is the front area of the brain, the executive processing center. That is a landmine trap for struggling upper grade learners, and for early grade learners, half the time it's not even built. I mean, you're the dead wasteland. So the higher level processing center is the area of the brain that actually is supposed to tune in and take part and pull these skills. And for a lot of learners, it's a part of the house that's either not built or there hasn't been good foundation laid for them to get to those networks proficiently. So when we sneak things in the back door, we're talking about that social emotive affective learning domain, taking advantage of that intelligence that lies there, which in this case, this AUAW, that is being stored and retrieved in the part of the brain that attends to social feedback and feels embarrassed. That's what these little arrows show right here. So the part of the brain that makes you feel embarrassed or that attends to social feedback is the area of the brain that we have tricked into storing this information. And brain plasticity is what allows us to do this. Brain plasticity means that your brain will naturally reassign responsibilities to stronger areas to circumvent areas of weakness that no longer can function or take in those tasks. If we know that the brain has the ability to kind of reroute where things are housed, then we can help that process along by disguising content in such a way as to trick a stronger area to take it in and keep it. That way it's there and it's accessible and ready to be used by learners who maybe wouldn't be ready to learn it, but they can certainly be handed it.
All right. So like I said, she explains all the brain parts way more than I can explain, but you're going through the part that's already developed in them, and then they're going to remember it there. And I like the example of that girl who didn't know what letters were, but she could still identify which ones were in love and said, ah, because whenever she does and is ready to decode and encode words, then she can retrieve that. And it's just going to be, that connection is going to be made right away. You don't have to wait for her to be ready to teach the sound then. She already has it. She's going to be the one who realizes it. She's going to make the connection herself. And if she's in one of your classrooms who has all these posters up, as soon as they realize what any of these are for, then all those connections are going to be made, and they're going to be able to have access to that all right away. Like the buffet, they can go grab everything at once instead of waiting for you to then just teach them one thing at a time when we think that they're ready for it. So they're super easy to use. Once you hear them, they're going to start seeing them everywhere. And I'm not going to lie, I start seeing them everywhere too, and it's obnoxious. I was out with some of my coworkers and I'm trying to convince all my kindergarten teachers to get them. I think I have them convinced now. They just didn't know what they were. Actually, I'm trying to get all of our teachers to get them. Anyways, but I was pointing out every word I saw. And I was like, how would you teach your kid that? They're like, I don't know, tell them that they'll learn that in first grade. I was like, what about that? What about that? And it's like, they were just literally everywhere. It was obnoxious, but also, and I can't read anything now without seeing them. It's embarrassing. So this is what you're like, she gets so many examples from teachers who are just pumped because they all kind of go in a little hesitant, like, I don't think my kids are ready for this, or they couldn't do it, or it wouldn't work for in our classroom. And then this is all you do is tell the stories, and it's going to turn into stuff like this.
Okay.
Okay, Robbie, go ahead. Tell us what you discovered over here.
Okay. He is like doing two things, so that's why we're calling him multitasking E, because
Okay.
he's doing two things.
What is he doing?
Telling the I to say its name and telling the C to say like the soft C.
Okay, and then what else?
CR, they're like a blend, so they actually they actually say this.
Her, okay.
And EA, it's two vowels go walking. The first one does the talking. So E E actually says E and A says nothing.
Okay.
And then
What did we discover? What made your heart so sad?
M, he's all alone. He has no one to be with. But he has to be with.
But he has me to be with. But like literally they just start analyzing him. But this girl, she was like one of the mom was a teacher and had gone to a training with Katie when she did like her full day. And she was telling her husband about it, like, oh, it was so cool. Like we learned these stories, like E and R, they are these bad drivers. So everywhere that they go, they're going, and then after they heard she was just making the noises. So again, they weren't even trying to tell her daughter the story, but she overheard them. And then so her mom taught it to her. And I think she was like a preschooler too. So then she would always pull them up and like wanted to know the story so she could play school at home. And she was teaching the stories to her, whatever, little sister or something.
Hi kids, do you want to know about the secrets about these? So E-R-I-R-U-R. When they get together, they hop in their cars, they drive crazy, and they say, "Arr, arr, 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 arr." Yeah. So, what they do, drive in their cars crazy. But when you grow up, you don't do that.
So it just, again, they'll just stick once you start telling them. Let's see, I feel like, okay, this one is, I'm not gonna show this whole thing, but this is just, again, showing you, this is gonna be a first grade classroom and they're doing some spelling and she's gonna tell them how many sound spaces they need. And then they're gonna be writing out the word and like they're obviously will need to use some of the stories to sound it out. So I'm gonna skip ahead just to show you
Okay,
parts of
ready?
it.
13 lines. Okay, go. Hurry. I think you can too.
So they're trying to write the word thunderstorms.
Maybe I can do it.
13 lines. Oh, that's too hard. I'll erase. We don't do it. How's your brain feel, Luke? It feels nervous. Okay. Are you ready? Chin it. Chin it. Let me see. Let me see. Oh my goodness.
I am so nervous.
Oh, let me see. Hold it up.
I am so nervous, but if I don't get it right, that's okay. I can always just fix my problem.
That's right. If you don't get it right, we try, and we just sometimes we work it out together, right?
I know.
Okay, ready, friends? Turn it around and let's check. Here we go. First sound. What do we hear first?
TH.
Well, show me the sound first. And what two letters make that?
TH.
Okay, check it on your board. Did you get it?
Yeah.
Okay. What comes next?
You.
Thank you for telling me the sound. And what letter is that?
Yeah.
U. Is he superhero or short and lazy?
Short.
That's right. What comes next? Sound. And what letter is that? How are we doing, friends?
Good.
Okay. What letter is that? D. A circle first and then a line. Okay. Thund. What's that? ER. Good job. Thunder. What comes next? Oh, that's a what?
Blend.
That's a blend. And what blend is that?
ST.
ST. St. Okay. Thund. St. What comes next? Show me. Show me. And what secret story is that? O-R.
Yes.
Oh, we're almost there. Did we make it?
I just did
Okay. Thunderst or what? And what letter is that? Oh. And what's the last sound?
I got the whole thing right.
Let me see. Show me.
So again, you can see like would have been 3 stories in there they would have needed to know: the TH, the ER, and the OR. And they're applying it there and so excited to spell words and hear the sounds in there. And just if you're thinking about like, well, how would I do this if I'm working with a kid who can't read the word or is struggling on a word? And if you've taught the story, all you have to do is just simply say like, oh, I see you're stuck in that word. Do you see one of our stories in there that could help you sound it out? Or if you see a story that they haven't learned, you could tell them, oh, there's one of our stories that I haven't told you. You could tell that kid and then the kid can teach the rest of the class later, or you could pull the whole class together quick and tell them. But either one of those, depending on your grade, it's a great way to introduce the story and give them ownership over it. And also if you use any word mapping, if you're going to be reading a book, has new words that they might not know or any high frequency words, you can use word mapping or orthographic mapping like this to kind of introduce those words to them. So if you haven't, if you're like been following the science of reading at all, you would tell them to see like how many sounds do you hear. So like in give, there's 3 sounds, and then they do each sound. So g, I, v. And since this is the parts, this would be like the heart part, because that's the part where you have 2 letters that make 1 sound. And so they need to remember the tricky part, that it's VE and not just the V. So you could introduce words or high frequency words that way during like your guided reading time. Okay, I'm going to just tell you guys how I started with them, and then I'll tell you how to implement them because they're super easy. I got these like last January. I was doing after school tutoring. There's about 10 third graders, and they were all just struggled with reading. And it like, I have never taught primary. So it's like, how do you teach them these letter sounds? And how do I teach them like whether it's a long vowel or a short vowel? And I'm like, there's so many things that you have to do. Like this just seemed impossible. And I had seen the secret stories on like social media. So I decided to just order them. And then I was right away was just going to use them just for those groups. But I'm like, I'm just going to stick them up on my wall for everyone. So I hung them up one day during indoor recess, and my whole entire class was just like interested right away. Like, what are those? And I'm like, I literally don't know because I didn't open the book yet. I told them I'm like, I'll look at the book tonight and figure it out. But for right now, I'm just going to hang them up. And then so the next day, that's when I started. I told them one story. I think I told them all the heroes first, just because they can make like their own sound, but when they're in disguise, they can make say their own name. And then from there, it led to Sneaky Y, which led to Jay wanting to know what his name was doing. And then Dawson realizing he had an AW in his, and he saw that poster up there. And it wasn't even necessarily me introducing them when we came across a word in text. They just wanted to know the stories. I have the word curious on my board. So they noticed there was an OUS. So they wanted to know that story. And even kids who didn't need them to read the words wanted to know them. And my highest reader, her mom sent me a message and was like, I don't know what you're talking about, but she's coming home and teaching all these stories about letters to my first grader, and he's just eating them up too, and they're finding them everywhere. And that was just like the first couple of days with me not knowing what I was doing. So that's what I mean by they're just super easy to implement, because you just put them up and the kids are gonna want to know more once you start telling them. And it's okay if you just be like, oh, I got to look up that story because it's new to me too, or whatever. But they really just took to it. And then from there, they were using them to decode a word. Because the best part, the reason why you need to put up all your posters too is because when they're trying to find one they know, they're scanning over all the other ones. So then they're going to see the ION and they're going to be like, oh, I can't figure out this word, and I see that's in there. Could you tell me that story so it can help me out? And they will. That does happen, and they'll use it for their writing too. So then after that, I posted about them on TikTok, and it somehow got back to Katie, and then Katie and I have been talking since. And then I went with her to Wyoming this summer, and have just been talking with her a lot and learning a lot from her and kind of doing some shadowing. So it's been a really cool opportunity. But I mean, like I said, I've just been obsessed with them and talking about them nonstop, which is again embarrassing, but it's where we're at. So what you guys can do, the easiest thing that all of you guys can do whenever, I'd say ASAP, is to just put all of your posters up. Even if you're kindergarten, put them all up. I know you probably think that you aren't going to need some like the longer stories like the ION or the TION, but put them up because you don't know what you're going to need. And like I said, then kids are scanning over them. They're going to see them. So put every single poster up. Don't wait to teach it. Don't wait until it comes up in your Journeys Phonics program. Just put every single poster up. If you're in primary, you guys should also sing the Better Alphabet song. You have the code to get that song in the back of your book. And it goes through and they sing all the possible letter sounds it can make. So it's I'm not going to sing to you because I'm not a good singer.
Oh,
But
come
like for,
on.
but for like C, it says like, C says, k, 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 but can also say, s, 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 and it'll put Q as like QU, like qua, because Q is never by itself anyways. But she says that if you do this, I think it's 2 times a day for 2 weeks or something like that, that the majority of your kids in kindergarten will know their letter sounds. And you're doing it while you're looking at like your alphabet train. So they're seeing the symbol, like the symbol to the sound connection. You're pointing, they're singing. So you should start that song like tomorrow and just do it like at least twice a day or more. And then after that, just introduce the stories as your students come across them. It's not something you need to plan. Like it's people just overthink it because we're so used to needing to know what comes next and when we should do it and what order do we go in. I would say that if you just want to start telling them like I did, I just told them about the superhero vowels first, because a lot of them then like can make that connection to like the AY and stuff like that. And if you're singing the better alphabet song anyways, that's going to say that A says A, it can also, or A, but it can also say A, or whatever. So it connects with the stories very well. But yeah, if you're reading a book and you come across a word that has a story in it, you could point it out to your kids. Or if you're writing on the board and you have one, you're like, oh, there's a story. There's another story in this word. I'm going to teach it to you guys real quick. It's super easy to point them out. And again, if you're like 4th, 5th, or 6th, you can just tell them as they come. My class would be like, hey, if we get back or if we get done early today, can you tell us like another one? And I started having to put sticky notes on the ones I would tell, because if a kid was gone and they came to school and I told one they didn't get to hear it, they were getting mad. So I had sticky notes on all of them so they would know if one was on, they would make me retell it. They just want to know which ones they missed. But once you tell them to your kids, your older kids, they're just going to start using them on their own and reading and writing. It's super cool. Again, I know it seems like a lot of wall space, especially because you can see mine back here, but it's going to be the most used thing in your room. So it's worth the wall space it takes up. When you're reading or writing to them, make sure you're pointing them out as you see them, or if you see them around school, you can point them out when you see words. When you're writing, that's a great way to point out. If you see like a mommy E, that's a really good one to introduce right away as well, because that'll help with knowing if when they're sounding out a word, if it's going to be a long or short vowel. If they see a mommy E, they know that vowel is going to say its name. If not, it's going to be a short and lazy one. And let your kids point out too, like a lot of my kids would start just taking like their bookmark when they were reading would just be like a strip of paper, and they would write down words that they would find that they had stories in them, and they would share them after. Again, nothing I prompted, but they just wanted to. It was another thing that was just like, we'd be reading for 15 or 20 minutes and they'd all stop to show me every single word they found. So I'm like, okay, let's maybe just chill for a hot second and write them down, and you can share them after. So just cool that they're finding them. Even if they knew the word, they just were finding that story in that word. Even in here, look at all the stories, like in that underlined are all different stories that they could have found. So, or that would relate. So they can find them literally anywhere. You don't need to have a worksheet to teach it to them, because they're going to be seeing them everywhere that they're reading and writing. And then put your students in the driver's seats. That kind of goes back to putting the posters up. If you only put up the posters after you've taught it, they don't know what else there is. They're not going to see them and make those connections like my students were doing in like the word curious and wanting to know why the O was crying in the word curious. So if you put them all up, they're getting ownership, and then you'll know which ones to introduce when. And also they're going to be looking at all of them every time they use them. And they're going to be sometimes might start making up their own stories to them, which is even better because they're going to remember that much more. And then just don't overthink it. It's literally the simplest thing you will ever implement in your classroom. Like you can't do it wrong unless you don't put up the posters. And you're still going to follow your phonics scope and sequence, and you're going to be teaching and using the stories or like in each grade. So it's not like you're gonna be like, okay, kindergarten, how about you take those 5 stories, 1st grade, we're gonna do these 5, 2nd grade, you guys can do those 3, 3rd grade, I'll take those 5. You're just gonna put them all up because like we talked about, like kids are gonna be ready at different points. And obviously they might need a refresher on a story from time or two as well, but having those posters in every grade, like I love that you guys have them every single grade, because this year they're gonna get them and next year they're gonna be up in that same classroom and they're gonna be able to use them again. And it's just going to keep building off of there. Where for my situation right now is I bought them on my own money because I'm impulsive and can't wait. So I bought them, and now nobody else in my building has them except for the title teachers saw them. So they bought them at the end of the last year with PTO money. So Katie, who does this, she's like, well, your title kids are going to start making more gains than the regular classroom. So those classroom teachers are going to try to figure out what they're doing and want them to. So we also just got a new principal. So I'm going to try to make her see these and then talk her into getting them school wide. But that'll be awesome for your guys' kids because they're going to see them every year. And you guys all have the same language. It's not like some of you guys are saying magic-y and some are saying sparkle-y. And some of you guys aren't even talking about like the silent E or the different verbiage there is. The stories are going to be pretty much the same in every single grade. Again, you might make your own little twist on it, but it's going to be connecting to that poster that they're going to see over and over again. There's just a few things that what not to do. Only putting up some of the posters, putting them where students can't easily see them. Ideally, they'd be the front of the classroom. Mine are kind of off to the side because the front of my room is wonky and has like storage up there. But you just want it to be somewhere where they can see them when they're trying to read or write because they're going to be using them. So if your desks are in rows and everyone's facing forward and they're always having to turn around constantly, that would just be inconvenient. But I think every classroom there has tables anyways. So if you put them on one of your side walls or whatever, there probably would be just accessible as needed. And then don't only introduce them when they come up in your curriculum. Don't wait for the CH to come up in your curriculum to tell that story. Tell it whenever it comes up in their reading or writing, and don't gatekeep what stories your students need, because like I said, it's a innocent way to do it. Even if you tell your kindergartner one about TION, they might not remember it and use it very often because they're not writing the word station all the time. But if you tell it and they don't remember it, that was 10 seconds you took, and they might also be able to make that connection and apply it to their reading or writing. Who knows? Now this is going to be, there's going to be some non-decodable words, a lot of them with like that schwa sound. These were just added in. It was actually a teacher, one of her kids came up with this and told it to Katie. So she incorporated it into her posters. On all of the vowel posters, you'll see that they all have like the thinking thing on there. And it's because they have the likely and most likely. So you have the long vowel sound, you have the short vowel sound, but you also have the sound. So I'm just going to play this because this would kind of show you how to decode like the word of, was, what, want. All those words we used to tell them, you just have to memorize it. Now they can actually be like able to decode it out.
Want to know a secret that will help your kids decode words that are undecodable, like was, of, want, some, love, come? It's called the thinking vowels head bob trick. You don't have to memorize these words. Kids can just read them. They can read them. Kids should never memorize words they can read, and they can read those words. Now I know what you're thinking. How? A word like of, you've got two letters and neither one are making the sound that they should. So how in the world could you decode or read that word? All you have to do is change the facts. That's what the secrets do, is they just put meaning where there otherwise would be none. And all the meaning comes from what makes sense to kids. Social and emotional, universal human experiences and understanding that we all share. And one thing that we all have in common is sometimes we can't make up our minds, even when we know what we're supposed to do, like the vowels, for example. They know whether they should be long or short. And if you use the secret stories, you know that the vowel trigger is mommy, E, and babysitters. That works for simple words or multisyllabic words. Kids can easily know which way the vowel is going to go. But sometimes vowels still don't know what they want to do, even though they know what they're supposed to do. Sometimes they just sit there and they just think, oh, should I be long? Should I be short? And while they're thinking, guess what sound comes out? And that's the sound they make. That's the schwa sound. That is actually the most likely sound default of vowels not making the sounds that they should. In words like of, or was, or or around, or pencil, or want, or what. All of the words, especially those high frequency, one syllable, stinking little sight word, heart word, memorized word group, don't have to be a nightmare for kids anymore. They don't have to be something that takes up rote memory space in the brain. They can actually become a playground for critical thinking and problem solving as kids work through the most likely or the next most likely thing that those letters are doing, just like we do with behaviors that our friends exhibit every day. The brain is a pattern making machine. We don't want a rule and exception and a rule and exception. We want to be able to think through it. Most likely, next most likely. Well, what else could it be? What else can I try? And we need a hierarchy of likelihood. So if we know that the likelihood is that in those one syllable high frequency words, any vowel that's not making a sound that it should is typically diverting to the schwa or a sound, all we need is a logical explanation for why. And it makes perfect sense that, like us, vowels sometimes just don't know what they want to do, even though they know what they should do. Sometimes they just don't feel like it, so they think about it. And that's the sound that pops out. We call it the thinking vowel head bop trick. You can start using it tomorrow so that your kids can read hundreds of words that otherwise may confuse them. And the reason we say head bop trick is that's how you prompt it. So if kids are trying to sound out a word like of or was or want, and they try to sound it out with the vowel making the sound they think it should make, like the ah sound, all you have to do to prompt that next most likely sound default is, that's it. And that sends them into where they can then attack the word with that next most likely sound. It's a great trick and it's so, so easy. And if you're wondering, but what about the other little blurps in the word, like was, for example, or of? Of has two letters, and if they go they still aren't making a V at the end. Allow them a little bit of common sense flexibility. Kids are a lot more clever than we think, and we want them to think. So when a child goes, it doesn't take a brain surgeon for them to realize they just said of. Even if they didn't say of, they got close enough to get the word. And that's really the key to keeping too many cooks out of the phonics kitchen. When things become so overwhelming, they become off limits or delayed in terms of access to early level readers. We need kids reading. We need to get kids reading. Reading is a better teacher than we will ever be. The more opaque, the more complex, the more complicated, the more rules, the more details, the more exceptions, the more the delay to getting kids reading. Text is everywhere. Kids could read 24 hours a day if only they could see familiar faces in the words that are all around them. So don't stretch out the phonics code into a 3-year puzzle that they have to wait for to put together. Give them more of the code sooner. Just give it to them in a way that makes sense based on what they already know. The earlier developing areas of the brain, the social and the emotional connections that are already there are so easy to anchor what would otherwise be abstract, complex phonics skills. But now they're not. Now they're just simple, logical, easy to remember stories or secrets that you can share every single day, everywhere you see them. And you arm kids with more and more and more power over text, less and less and less memorizing of text. And at the end of the day, all of this is a vehicle for more critical thinking, because everything that we arm them with as a tool or as a strategy, they can use to attack text and think through the options, even with words they've never seen before. That's empowering. That's what we want to do and what we want to give our kids. So don't slow it down. Keep it simple, because it can be simple and it can be so, so, so much fun.
All right. So then if you just think about like with that, all these sight words that no longer have to be sight, they can sound them out by either knowing the stories like the mommy Eve for like, or if you get the schwa sound or the thinking vowels for like now, that would be one of the stories with the ow sound. Down, every, a ways has the schwa and then the a at the end of it. So they're no longer having to memorize these words. They can actually sound and decode them out. And it was something like if you decode a word, it takes you like 4 times to decode it till your brain stores and remembers that word then. But if you try to just see a word and teach them that the word what is the word what without doing the sound of symbol, it's like hundreds of times that they would have to have that flashed at them until they would remember it. So just by decoding it, they're going to get stored in their brain that much faster. Secrets in the upper elementary. Think about all these multiple syllable words that they have to see all the time. And if your kids see the word investigation, you're going to have third, fourth, fifth graders that see that long word and they just panic and like guess and don't try to attack it. But when they have these stories, they're going to see them in there, and it makes it that much easier for them to read them. In science, we were doing we were talking about amphibians and reptiles, metamorphosis, everything in our animal unit. And I had already introduced those words, but they instantly pointed out like the PH for the sound. So when they were making their posters, I did not have one kid who wrote an F in there. And every other year, that's pretty much what they all resort to. Like, yeah, maybe they saw the word amphibians, but they had no reason to remember that it's a PH in there. And they all did. Every single poster had that because they were so excited to point it out to me that they saw that story in there. So I know a lot of this has seemed like targeted towards the primary grades, but when you put these up in your upper grade classrooms, they're going to see these, you're going to tell them, and they're going to use it for the word hydraulic. They're going to see the sneaky Y at the end of democracy. They're going to see the Asian, the ATION story, and it's going to help them both sound it out if they're a struggling reader, but when they go to write that, they're going to recognize it in there, and it's going to allow them to actually get close to spelling it right. Now, again, is it going to make them perfect spellers? No, but what they're doing makes sense, and the more they see it in text will help them, fine tune that and choosing the correct version of the story to use. And then we kind of talked about if it doesn't follow a rule, there's going to be some rules that just won't, and there's a section in the book that kind of has that. Like you could call it word jail, timeout list, rule breaker, heart words. I really like how Katie talks about how just because you go into word jail doesn't mean that you can't be let out, because sometimes kids will come up with a way to remember it, so then it's no longer in your word jail. That way it doesn't get too crowded. A big thing you guys should all do is join her Facebook group. It's just called Secret Stories Secret Stories Phonics Support. If you look that up, as you can see, I took the screenshot today. There's over 27,000 teachers in there. People are constantly posting their ideas or asking questions. There's free files that people will upload with different things that they make. Sometimes it can get a little overwhelming because people sometimes, like I said, overthink it. So they're asking too many questions like, oh, I don't know how to organize my posters, where some people do like to do them by like the vowels, the diagraphs, whatever else. I just put mine up in whatever. I made a pattern with the colors because that's what I did. Like there's not a right or wrong way to do it. So sometimes you might get overwhelmed, like if you see stuff just because people are overthinking it, but there's so many good questions. People post so many good ideas on there and just ways to kind of take it to the next step. Like I've said, all you need to do is have the posters up and you're going to be just fine. But there are more things you can do while you're using the stories. Another thing that you guys can do, and I'll share this with Carrie and she can send it out, but on her website, thesecretstories.com, if you go to workshops and then go down to session handouts, you can download like a 87-page PDF. And a lot of it, I kind of went through that to kind of pull my information for this. But it'll have videos linked, it'll have resources linked, it'll have the studies and of the research linked. So if you want to look through that to kind of get a refresher or just to see some more examples. Another really cool thing on her website is she has writing samples from her kindergartners when she taught and using these, and her kindergartners were writing better than half of my third graders. And it's because they no longer had to sit there and choose what words they knew. They were just attacking words with the secret stories that they knew. They didn't stop. So the writing process was constant, it was fluid, where so many of my kids stop every time they don't know a word. And it's hard for them to get their thoughts down because they're so worried about how do I spell that because I don't understand what sounds I'm hearing in that word. So that's another, if you get bored, want to check out. Okay, from there, any questions? Did any of that make sense?
I have a question.
Yes.
What's the difference between the secret stories and then the lively letters?
So Lively Letters is a program.
Okay.
Where this isn't a program, it goes with whatever you're doing. I literally just saw a response to that because if any of you guys know like Jen Jones at all, her and Katie really work a lot together. So I just literally was looking at Jen's Instagram and somebody asked her the same question. I'm going to find the response, but that way I don't mess it up. But I do know Lively Letters is a program, and okay. So with regard to how secret stories different from story-based approaches like learning letters, phonics, or lively letters, or jolly phonics, all of which can be used with secret stories if mandated. Here's a quick video. It explains the difference between them. The stories are the fastest way to trigger social emotional engagement in the brain and forge a deep feeling-based connection to otherwise abstract phonics skills. While the video focuses on Jolly Phonics, the points apply to other story-based programs as well.
And here's the last thing I'm going to say, and it goes to story. There's good, better, best when it comes to stories. I just want to toss out one thing because I want you to just hear how stories can take a detour and bring you further away from where you're trying to get. Irving steals all the ink bottles he can find and proudly reports his catch by saying his last name, and that teaches IR. Now, that's a story for sure, but it's not rooted in anything kids would understand because we don't catch ink bottles. We don't know what ink bottles are. If we did, we wouldn't catch them. We wouldn't put them in a net. And when we're excited or proud of ourselves, we don't yell out our own name and go, Katie. We don't do any of those things. And if you can keep track of that, you know what you walk away with? The sound. What about the ER and the UR? Like we could knock out all of those instantly by connecting it with something kids already know. And now we've got all three. As it stands, we actually have to learn them separately. There's 2 other crazy stories to get the other 2 sounds to get all 3. And you're told on your chart that you want to avoid moving from one to the other until they show mastery of the first. So for children who don't, put them in an intervention plan. This is bizarre to me. Why should my inability to remember Irving limit my ability to move on to whatever the crazy story is going to be for ER? And why should I have to have intervention just because I'm not able to use this stuff to actually read and write when the story itself is quite a challenge to keep track of and make sense of, let alone why is one more important than the other? Why do I need to have mastery of one before I can have the other? If you give them to me in a way where I can instantly have access to them, the more I have, the more sense I can make of text that's all around me. So we cut off our nose to spite our face if we hold things back on purpose. It's just fascinating. And I'll just say like one more here. From the salty waters, walrus splashes Apple Annie's face and she complains, oh, that's awful. Again, you get the AW, what about the AU? And then you have to keep track of things like a walrus and Apple Annie or Annie whoever and salty water wells. And I mean, I'd almost just rather memorize the phonics pattern. And there are grade level walls, which means you don't actually teach all of these. You have grade specific ones that they get at certain times. So this is how things aren't always the same. Every story isn't any story. When you're going to use a story to teach, you really want to think about with it. And it's not just giving them a little story or a little trick. It's not that at all. There's a whole nother level of power that we're going to look at as to going with what they know, using what they already understand, taking advantage of existing patterns of understanding to connect with content they've never seen before. Now, here's how this happened. Here's how that 4-year-old was able to instantly give me back the sound when I showed her the symbol, or the symbol when I showed her the sound. So this is what she did. Her brain development is back to front. So the brain develops back to front. By back to front, the earlier developing area of the brain that we're talking about is the social emotional systems, the feeling-based networks. So that is the area of the brain that we're actually tapping with this. The higher level executive processing center is what you see toward the front. It is the part of the brain that's going to connect these as sounds with symbols and then identify additional letters that come into play as a sequence that then creates what's called a phonics pattern. And then they have to segment words in order to hear the sound. When that little girl gave me back that sound, she wasn't thinking lip position, tongue position, mouth shape sounds like. She was feeling a feeling, and the feeling created the sound. Ah, that's all she did. She just felt the feeling and then the sound came out. Totally different area of the brain retrieving that than if she would have had to think along the lines of traditional instruction, which is which word, which sound, what's the mouth shape? Is it tongue position, lip position, ah, as in August, awesome, awful, or is it ah, as in apple, or blah, 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 or EU, EW, or AU, AW, or OU, OW. All of those different patterns and higher level academic concepts that our kids, certainly in kindergarten, are not ready for. And that's why this takes 3 to 4 years to go through the back door or the front door. But when you go through the back door, you don't have to rely on any of that being in place. All of those holes, if you're working with upper grade learners, are irrelevant because you're slipping something in a place that is already working, already primed, already developed. The social emotional systems are actually the areas kids use to tattle with. They're also the areas that let them know how it feels when no one plays with them or when they get to be the line leader. It's the way they can keep track of who the line leader is, who the line leader was, who got fired, what the punishment was, what the principal said they were going to do. All the things that they keep track of and drive your substitute crazy with, come from that area of the brain. That area of the brain is very capable of maintaining a lot of information and actually using it to process new information. Now, here's the rub. How do we cheat? How do we get, how do we tap into that part of the brain when obviously that is not the part of the brain that's supposed to be kicking in to capture this skill? Letters and sounds and phonics have nothing to do with feeling. You should feel nothing when you're looking or talking about letters and sounds, unless we cheat. Brain plasticity lets us play with what areas of the brain we can engage or trigger based on how we encode or wrap up the content. So if we want to wrap up letters and sounds with a social, emotional, feeling-based disguise, we can trick that area of the brain into engaging and actually grabbing and keeping that information and retrieving it to give back. That's why when the little girl gave us the sound back, she had the same head tilt. She had the same arms up like this. She had the same kind of wiggle and the same vocal inflection. Ah, because it was coming from the area of the brain that connected with that feeling, that understood that connection. Now, once we move it in there, once we front load that code, now we have an opportunity to start building that higher level thinking network because we've got some meat to play with. We've got some opportunities now to bait the brain.
She's a video about it on her website or YouTube channel. Those are programs, so they have like a scope and sequence where you're waiting and it doesn't necessarily tie to the same parts of the brain. Anything else?
Are you gonna come see us?
Yeah, if you guys have school a day that I don't have school. And when I come, you all better have your posters up.
Can we, Fletcher, can they be cut down so they're not so big?
They can, yes. If you go in that group, actually, there's tons of people show the different ways they've cut down around them if they needed. People freak out about laminating them and stuff too. I didn't laminate mine, so don't. I feel like that's just more work, and then it glares, and if you already laminated yours, sorry, but I think it's just stupid to do that. I get the point that you don't like wrinkle or whatever the poster, but it's like, I don't know. I just think it's a waste of time. But if you want to do that, do it. But you'll see people in there like have cut theirs down and trimmed it to save space.
Okay.
And I think one year she said that she's seen pictures of people who had to put them on their ceiling to get them up there. But it's like I said, once you put them up and realize how often your kids are looking at them, you won't really care anymore. And it's going to be a big part. If you don't put your posters up and you try to just tell them the stories, or you try to put up some of them, it's not going to work as well. Like you need them all up.
All right, well, we'll try to send you videos, Fletcher.
Do it. And also, if you like, well, join that group too and share stuff in there, because it's always fun to see the different things teachers are doing. Like some people have props for when they're introducing some of the stories, and I don't know, you just kind of get to see really cool stuff and you realize how well it works because you're seeing them with real classrooms and real teachers, and just I don't know, I'm always just blown away because I'm like, I can't wait to have them for a full year this year. Like I said, I didn't get them till like February. So I'm just kind of pumped about it. So anyway, if you you have questions at all, when you put them up there, let me know. Don't feel afraid to send me a message, text me, do anything. But there's not a wrong way to do it unless you don't put up your posters or only put up some of them.
All right.
Denise, I'm going to be texting you. I'm going to FaceTime you on Monday and they're going to be up.
All right.
Oh.
Don't FaceTime me too early on Monday.
Well, I'm not going to FaceTime you too early because I don't want to be awake, but.
Okay.
Yeah, he doesn't
Then
start like the ninth.
You're going to tell me how many of them they want to know because it'll be constant.
All right.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks,
Fletcher.
Fletcher.
Yes, no problem. See you guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye-bye.